we'll be having a formal session on software engineering, and our guest today is Abdullah Sattar. Along with him, we have a panel. We have ID support from Saifur Rahman, and Usman Amir will be co-hosting along with me, Taha Rasool Sheikh. I just want to give a brief background of French Cafe Club of Canada. French Cafe is a social club which is headquartered and originated from Calgary. And the main purpose of this club is to engage people socially. And we have four different sectors we spend time in. First is welfare, just to support people. The second is professional. The event which we are having comes under this bucket. The third is recreational. There are many recreational activities planned under the banner of French Cafe. And the fourth is sports. So you can have many sports event on regular basis coming under the umbrella of French Cafe, happening under the umbrella. And the presence is not only in Calgary and not only in Alberta, it's across Canada. We have presence in Edmonton, we have presence in Vancouver. Like I am in Vancouver and leading one of the chapters of French Cafe. We have presence in East, we have chapter in Ottawa, we have chapter in GTA, and we recently had a presence created in Manitoba. So we are growing. We have around 1,000 plus professionals in French Cafe, which are benefiting and people and getting benefited. This is one of an initiative we have taken to have a short talk. Today our focus is to engage two audience. One is parents who are concerned about their kids who are in high school, which field to take, and this is one of the field which Abdullah Sattar has taken, and he would shed some light on it. And we will be, and the second audience is the kids themselves, like if they're in high school, they can discuss this one of the prospective like field which they can take up if they like it. So before we formally start the session, I'd like to introduce Usman Amir. Usman, can you please introduce yourself?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Usman Amir, and I'm a current engineering student at UFC, University of Calgary. I am also an admin at FC Calgary, and I appreciate them bringing me on as one of the admins over there. So I've known Taha Bhai through there, Taha Sheikh from there, and for our guest speaker today, I know Abdullah Sattar from working together at Pakistani Student Society, so the PSS at UFC. That's where I first met Abdullah, and then we threw a great bunch of events, and it's really great to see him, working in his field and back with us for a very informal and it's going to be a very casual talk. So I look forward to this talk.
Yeah, that's correct, Usman. It'll be informal, just transferring of information, the basic one, within a span of like 30-40 minutes. We'll have Abdullah will be shedding some light, and later on we can take some questions and answers, and from there we can take away. Later, the second person I want to introduce is Saif or Rahman. Saif bhai, can you please introduce yourself?
Assalamu alaikum, guys. My name is Saif Rahman, and I'm part of FC admin team, and I've been with FC for almost like 3 years, and I take care of like IT matters for FC events, and yeah, so that's kind of like.
Thank you very much, Saif bhai. He's a great resource. He's always there to support us during this IT program, whatever we have on Zoom, and he's a I would regard him now. He's a professional hiker. He goes in the mountains every week. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself. My name is Tahar Rasool Sheikh. I'm a professional engineer working with Trans Mountain as a project engineer. Been associated with the French Cafe for the past 5 years. Have led and been a part of many French Cafe events. Now it's time to hand over mic to Abdullah Sattar. Abdullah, please, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Tahabai. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Wa alaikum assalam and assalamu alaikum to everybody listening in. It's a great pleasure to join the Friends Cafe. You guys are doing great work. I was at the mentorship event and I know that you guys have done a lot of good work in Calgary, especially for the youth and connecting the youth to the industry professionals. So that's amazing, mashallah. A little bit about myself. I moved to Canada about 8 years ago from Pakistan, and I started a degree in engineering. Before I did engineering, I did A-levels from my high school. And when I was in engineering in my first year, Usman will be able to shed more light on this, that we actually pick our major after the first year. So based on your GPA in the first year, based on the GPA and your choices, you pick your major, whether you want to go into software engineering or electrical or mechanical, so and so. So when I was in first year, I used to think about, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to be a mechanical engineer or a chemical? Originally, I wanted to be a chemical engineer, but I realized that that's not for me when I looked at some of the courses. But software engineering seemed like the perfect blend between sort of creativity and analytical skills. So you're using a lot of your analytical and technical skills, but you're also using a lot of your creativity. And that blend is what encouraged me to go into software engineering. And I think, alhamdulillah, it was, in retrospect, I'm glad that it was a good decision. Basically, I'll really quickly go over some of the admission criteria from going from high school into university. And I'll provide resources for people to check that out themselves as well. I will provide a caveat that I started my first year in 2013. So it has been about 8 years. So maybe the information is slightly outdated, but I'll provide the websites to people for them to check it out themselves as well. So if you just Google University of Calgary admission criteria, it actually takes you to a website, ucalgary.ca/admissions, what actually allows you to put in your major and allows you to put in your high school province or your type of high school. So whether you did A-levels, IB, so and so. And then it lists down the admission criteria. So for engineering, for Alberta, the admission criteria that I wrote down was English language arts 30-1, mathematics 30-1, mathematics 31, chemistry 30, physics 30/biology 30. So one of those two. And obviously there's more details there. And if anybody has any questions, like I can pass on the site to them to specifically talk about that in particular. Now, within engineering, once you start engineering, there's a few different areas of study that you have to focus on. So one of the most common questions that I get is, well, how much coding do you have to do in software engineering? Like, how much are you in front of a computer all day? And if somebody hypothetically isn't that good at coding, can they not do software engineering? So I think that the honest answer to that is it really depends on the field that you choose after you graduate. Generally, when you start your degree at the UFC, like I mentioned, the first year is common. So you'll have to take courses that essentially generally fall under the stream of mechanical, chemical, electrical, software. You'll have to take all those courses if you're a first year engineering graduate. And the purpose behind that is that enables you to understand what your skills are and where your interests lie. And then you can make an informed decision after first year. When you go into your second year, now this is where the streams start kind of diverging. So you've got the electrical software stream over here. You've got the mechanical, chemical, civil stream over here, the geomatic stream kind of somewhere in the middle. But generally, then your streams start sort of like diverging. But you still have to take, as a software grad, you'll still have to take some courses which are essentially electrical engineering courses, and even some courses that are common to all, such as statistics. But then by your third year, software is pretty much independent. So your third and fourth year, specifically software courses. And then when you do software engineering at the U of C, that's the Schulich School of Engineering, you'll be taking a lot of computer science courses. So the courses themselves would be offered by the comp sci department, but the degree you'll get would be a software engineering degree. Within those courses, there is fair bit of coding. especially in your third year, because what they try to do is that they try to build a base for you. So you learn languages such as Java, C++, assembly. I think now they're also starting to teach Python as well. And so when you do these courses, particularly also, embedded software programming, software performance, software testing, so you're basically being introduced to all the different fields that you could possibly go into once you graduate, and that builds the base. So there is a lot of coding. I remember being in the labs for a long time. I think arguably software engineering is one of those degrees where the labs and assignments are equally as important as the final exams, if not more important, because there's a lot of emphasis on this practicality, or doing things with your own hand, kind of getting your hands dirty, sitting in front of a computer, troubleshooting the code, actually figuring stuff out, and presenting a finished product from start to finish. But that's very valuable, because once you build that skill set and you're in that environment where you can make mistakes and you can ask questions, it builds a lot of confidence, and it also builds a lot of skills that can, you can be used later on. But generally, that's basically what the courses essentially look like. I also receive this question sometimes, that what's the difference between computer science and software engineering, particularly at the UC? And I think that's a very good and fair question. I think when you talk about courses, they're very similar. Within computer science, people get the choice to pick a concentration. So if I'm a computer science graduate, I can get the choice to pick computer graphics, or I can pick software engineering, or I can pick video game design. Like, there's different fields within computer science that you're able to pick. One of the concentrations, as I mentioned, within the comp sci degree is software engineering. And those same courses are the ones, a lot of those courses we take as Schulich grads. But the difference is that when you go to Schulich, there's, in my opinion, there's a couple benefits. So the first thing is that when you get that common year, it helps you understand that, okay, hypothetically, I changed my mind about being a software engineer. By the end of first year, I can go into mechanical, chemical, civil. Also, and this is particularly for Alberta, when you graduate with a degree in engineering, you get the title of engineer in training. And then you can work your way up to a professional engineer certification, which in Alberta, it actually increases your employability. It also, obviously, it's a good certification to have. And there's a few other benefits as well to this degree. Industry connections being one. A lot of the Schulich people, Schulich professors, the Schulich department generally has a lot of industry connections, which helps in employability. So that's kind of the...
Abdullah, I have a question here. As you were saying about the industry, does this software engineering program provide co-op opportunity?
Yes, that's a good question. So the engineering program, and again, Usman can also comment on this as well, because we pretty much went to the same program. The engineering program has an internship program. So essentially what that happens is that it's between 12 and 16 months. At least that's what it was, because I went on internship back in 2016. I can talk about that as well. Generally, the 12 to 16 months, because you're in the internship program, it increases the chance for you to actually get a job, essentially. Because what happens is that a lot of companies, they create positions that are specifically for people who are in internship programs at different universities. So if you're, let's say, not an internship program, you're essentially, your competitiveness for that job might be lower than somebody who's actually inside an internship program at a university such as the UC. So yes, they do have an internship program.
And does these internship, the university supports you to get one, or you have to look for yourself?
Yeah, so the university definitely provides support. One of those things is that the Career Center is a portal that you have access to as a student. There's a lot of jobs that show up there that don't even show up on LinkedIn or Indeed. So there's some exclusive jobs there. They also have a lot of resume making workshops, cover letter workshops, interview training. So that helps a lot. And generally, the university has industry connections, right? So companies know that every year there's students that are going to be interns coming from the UC, so they keep an eye out. The recruiters keep an eye out. There's also a lot of recruiting events where you can actually go and talk to people. So there's a lot of benefits to that.
Okay, and as you told, the internship can be from 12 to 16 months. How many terms can an individual, a student can only once during the 4-year, like the bachelor's program, or can he do multiple times?
Yeah, so when I was doing my internship, it was only one. I don't know if the rules have changed. I'll be very honest, but that's something that I can maybe look into, and then I can provide the information to you, and you can disseminate that information to other people as well.
Technically, only one is allowed, where the university supports your whole going to work at the company and then coming back. But I know people who have done 2 terms, and I mean 2 full 12-month or 16-month terms. It can be done, and if there is a situation where you want to work longer, you like the company, or maybe for whatever reason, it is possible. But in my personal opinion, not to take away from what Abdullah is saying, but in my personal opinion, uh, students should start looking for either research or either some sort of summer job from after their first year. Less chances, yes, but once you start looking, you start understanding what you need to do to get an internship eventually. And maybe you score a summer job next year, like after second year, or maybe you score a research position. And from then on, it's only going to increase your value to a prospective employer. And so therefore, a higher chance for you to get an internship in your third year.
Perfect. So as you told, that internship brings up like the experience. Once you graduate, you are above this experience level as a fresh graduate without experience. The chances of employment increases. And is it true that many of the companies where you do internship refer you or to give you a chance of employment after graduation?
Yeah, that's actually very common. A lot of my friends actually, where they did internship, they actually went back to those companies. So that's very, very common. And speaking of industry, actually, I think that's the most fun topic to talk about personally. I'll talk a bit about my kind of industry journey, and then we can talk about some of the opportunities that are in Calgary in this field. So my first professional job was, I worked at an oil company. It was called Nexen back then. It's now called CNOC. I did a 16-month internship there, and that was a back-end engineering sort of role, data and slash data analytics. So that was a very interesting role because it was my first professional job, my first software job. It was a bit challenging at first, but alhamdulillah, it ended up being okay. Then when I graduated in 2018, I actually switched roles entirely. So I moved away from the technical side of things, and I actually went into, there is a field within software engineering called client success management. So this is a good tangent actually. An industry that's really booming right now within the software world is the SaaS industry, software as a service, which is basically cloud technology. So an example would be, let's say I have a company, that company manages payroll for people. So historically, what would happen is that, if Tahaba, you have a company, you can, hire me as a consultant, and then I'll physically take your data, I'll take it to my offices, and I'll run your payrolls for you. But now what's happening, you have all this in the cloud. So you've got these cloud companies that store people's data, that actually help people store their data themselves, and it help people essentially create a virtual online data storage, which is basically the cloud. So within the SaaS industry, there's a position called client success management. And that's a mix between, think of it as a mix between consulting and business analytics. So what you're doing is that you need to have technical knowledge to be able to understand that technology. You also need to have business acumen to be able to understand the demands of the company that was working with you. So, for about a year and a half, I actually didn't even touch code. I was completely working on consulting. And then in 2020, March, that was the first day of the pandemic, I started my current job, which was a quality assurance analyst at Sherbrooke at Morgan Stanley. And this was, again, a technical job. So the point of this is that, people think, and when I was in university, people would tell me too that, again, if you're not good at coding or if you don't enjoy it that much, you're screwed basically, and you're not going to be able to achieve in your career what people who enjoy coding would be. But that's not necessarily true. You need a baseline amount of knowledge, and obviously the more you're able to excel, the better. But there's a lot of fields within the software industry that don't require a lot of coding practices. Like I mentioned, for example, client success management, project management, consulting, even QA. So my current role is a quality assurance analyst. What the QA basically does is that the QA tries to find bugs in the software. So in my team, if I have 3 developers and I have 1 QA, the devs will create the code and they'll send it off to the QA. So the QA will now apply 2 techniques to test the code. And they're basically technical terms. One's called black box testing. The other one's called white box testing. Black box testing is, imagine if I had a Facebook app, any app, for example, and I'm just using it on my phone and I'm trying to test all the functionality to try to find a bug. I have no idea how the code works and I'm blind to it. So I'm completely going off on what a user would do, essentially. And a lot of companies do that to find bugs. White box testing is that I have access to the code and I can automate test scripts to test a lot of functionality. So in my current role, I do a bit of both. There's some technical stuff, but I also do some non-technical stuff where I'm just playing actually with the software. And I'm also help teach. So for example, there's learning sessions there. If a client needs any assistance or new employees, so you help with onboarding. So there's a spectrum of opportunities that you're able to achieve or you're able to do within software. Skills are very transferable as well. Sorry, go ahead.
So go ahead, Usman.
Sorry, just a quick question from here. You said black box testing. So is that like how beta versions of apps are released and they, bring it out to people to test it?
Exactly. So there's two stages. The first stage is when the QAs do it. So if I'm a QA at a company, I'll do it. And then the second stage, what you're talking about, is called user acceptance testing. So what they'll do is that beta testing, they'll actually, after that stage is gone, before they release the product, they'll get some random people and they'll say, hey, how about you just use our app and try to see how you like it. The purposes for both are a bit different. For the QA testing, you're actually trying to find bugs in the software. And for the user testing, you're actually seeing how the users receive it. So usability, the UX, is the UX intuitive? Do they have trouble launching the app? Like, do they like it? How do they feel about it? So that's the two sort of divergences there.
Okay. So Abdullah, you just shared there's like the coding is one of the technical software field. The other one you just said cloud management or SES you told about. What other fields are there which a software engineer can take up and progress the career in?
For sure. So the most hot kind of like the hot commodity right now, or the most in demand position right now, is the full stack developer. Mm-hmm. So for a full stack dev it's a technical position where a full stack dev touches everything. So in software, you've got layers, you've got the front end and the back end. The front end would be, well, how does the graphics of this website look like, or this app? What are the buttons? What do the buttons do? Like if I click here, what happens? That's the front end. The back end is, okay, once I've clicked the button, what part of the database is connecting to? How do I manage that database? How do I ensure that it doesn't hang, it doesn't crash? That's the back end. This is the front end. And in the middle, you have, integrations happening. A full stack dev touches everything. So nowadays, pretty much most devs that you'll find are full stack developers. Other than that, the other most common field, the one that I do, is QA. So quality assurance analyst. This is a mix of both technical and non-technical. I mentioned client success management as well. That's purely non-technical. You just need to have some technical knowledge to be able to understand what's going on. But what you're basically doing is that you're optimizing the software for the client. So what you're doing is you're making sure that they know exactly how to use it to the best of their ability and tweaking it, basically. There is another field called implementation specialist. So the implementation specialist is somebody who, again, when the company first buys a software or they find a contract, let's say I have a software company, you have a company, and you sign a contract with me, I'll send an implementation specialist over to you who acts like a consultant for the first 6-7 months and helps implement the software fully. Because these SaaS softwares, cloud softwares, are very complex and they're huge softwares. So they require a lot of setup and learning and teaching as well. Then some of the other fields, if we're going back to the technical side, are data analytics or AI. Again, a very, very in-demand field. Machine learning. This is a very, very rewarding field, but it is a bit difficult to get into. Most positions that I've come across for data analytics or AI require a master's degree in that field. There are some positions that you can get into. If you're in a company, you can kind of laterally move to that position. Generally, you'll require a master's degree in those fields, but that's a whole different ballgame. Like that's, there's some cutting edge software coming out of there. You've got companies like Tesla, for example. They do neural computing, neural networks. They do that to, for their self-autonomous cars or their self-driving cars. So a lot of people I know actually work for companies like this where they work on AI. and the AI is being used to kind of teach cars to drive themselves. Robotics, another field within that. And particularly, like I mentioned, I mean, there's like a huge, even within, let's say, a full stack dev, you have different industries to go into. So a full stack developer at a biomedical engineering company would work with completely different technology than, let's say, somebody who works at a financial tech company, or let's say somebody who works at an oil company or a defense company. So there's a lot of spectrum. And on top of that, once you've kind of had your foot through the door in the industry, and let's say you're like, you know what, I'm done with coding, I'm done with the technical side, I like the people management side of it. So you can easily go into product management, project management, and development management. So they're all different fields. The product manager or product owner essentially is responsible to deliver the product on time. The project manager handles the business acumen, business side of things. And then the dev manager handles the developers and the coders and the QA. So there's a lot of like options for people who are interested in different things.
So,
Go ahead, Usman.
sorry. So for those who are interested in coding, so the technical side of software engineering, if you can summarize maybe a few languages or maybe a few resources for that, what would you say about that?
Yeah, again, this is a very, it's a good question, but it's also a very subjective question. It'll depend on what they want to go into.
Yeah.
If they want to go into hard development at a company, Java is the most popular language, even today. Most companies still use Java as a code base. If they want to go into web dev, so, you know, most of these cloud companies nowadays, they're completely online, right? So for web development, they'll require full stack. And for full stack, the two major languages are essentially JavaScript and PHP for the backend. So JavaScript actually for the front end, and PHP or SQL for the backend. If you want to go into AI or machine learning, you'll use, you know, Python is a very common language. People use Python, but then there's also a lot of tools that they use. I also forgot to mention one more industry which is connected to this question as well. Within cloud architecture, you can actually go into making the cloud or working on cloud architecture. So that would be, for example, Amazon Web Services or Microsoft Azure. So these are basically certifications that you can do. There'll be some coding in different languages, but generally you'd be working on the architecture. If you want to go into mobile development, for example, for Android, you'll do Java. For iOS, you'll do Swift. That's their own coding language. So it really depends on what you want to do. The advice that I give to somebody who's just kind of dipping their toes into it is go to a website like udemy.com or Coursera, sign up for a cheap full stack dev course. That'll give you an idea of what a full stack dev does. And that's the most common developer role. So that's kind of, I would say.
I'd like to add one more thing. When I was back in Calgary, the Calgary library had many free courses. Like for Udemy, you have to sign up and pay. But University of Calgary the library in Calgary provided free courses. So kids can go out and explore that resource as well. And Abdullah, I want to ask you a question. Like I have seen many my extended family, like young teenagers getting into codings and creating softwares and winning prizes. So can it be a simple rule of thumb that if a person is good at coding, he should do software engineering?
Obviously, it really depends on their interests. So I wouldn't say that's generally for everybody, but I will say that if you enjoy coding, you'll have a lot of fun as a software engineer. Because if you enjoy coding, everything is like a game. It's like a puzzle to you. So you're trying to figure out, okay, what's the best way to do this? So my friends who really love coding, they love their jobs. Like they are just, they code as if they're just playing a video game or something. So it's definitely, even if you're not a software engineer, coding is a good skill to have in the 21st century.
Yeah, we can see many people shifting their careers from I'm a mechanical engineer. I know engineers of non-software background doing data sciences these days, and I know few of my friends doing business masters in business analytics from UBC. So they're maneuvering their career towards business analytics. This is like that data analytics, AI. This is you can say one of the in-demand field.
Absolutely. Yeah. Probably the most, to be honest. And you mentioned, switching fields. I think that's a very good point, and a good tangent to talk about. The UFC actually has a master's degree, which is a year-long master's degree. So if you have an engineering degree, which is a non-software engineering degree, and if you match the GPA requirements, then you can actually do a degree in software engineering, a master's degree within 1 year. And the people that I know actually who went through that, some of them are working at Amazon, at these big companies. And I think the one reason they did that program was because the demand for computer engineers and software developers was so high, and the supply wasn't being met. So the university actually started a quick sort of like a 1 year program to churn out more engineers. So it's always, it's a good idea to get into a field where the demand is a lot higher than the supply. It's, simple economics. So from an employability perspective, Alberta in particular is investing a lot in tech. So I was recently reading that ATB, I think, is going to open up like hundreds of new tech roles. The company I work for has a lot of openings. Many companies, tech company, pretty much every tech company that I know of in Calgary is hiring, even during the pandemic. And in fact, the pandemic actually made it better because for the software companies, because everything was remote, they were already used to the remote work. So, it made the demand even higher. So it's from an employability perspective, it's a really good field to get into.
And over here, I'd like to add one point that one of our French cafeterian who did a program on data analytics, Kamran Imam, he's my senior from NED University as well. He did the master's program, if I'm not wrong. Sorry about it, Kamran, if I'm saying it incorrectly. But he did the master's program, although his bachelor's was in petroleum engineering, and presently he got employed with CRA. So petroleum, data sciences, and now CRA, and this is a blend which one can do. So this field is not only restricted to bachelors, you can also explore like opportunities in master's level as well.
Absolutely.
So another question came in my mind, Abdullah, is that before pandemic, as a mechanical engineer, I never thought I'll work from home. But things have changed for the past 18 months that we have started working. But prior to pandemic, we all thought these IT guys can only work remotely. So can we say that software engineering, the jobs related to it are mostly you can do it remotely?
Yeah, I mean, it depends again on the company that you work in and your team dynamic, but generally I would say that it's easy to work remotely in software. um we have the technology for it. Like we have things like Zoom, for example, for the video calls or for the meetings. And generally for the software itself, like you're just working on your own machine. So I would say even before the pandemic, tech has always been kind of this informal industry. I mean, people, some people go to work in shorts, for example, in different companies. Even the big four, the big companies like Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Facebook, they have a very cool company culture. That's because the nature of the industry is just like that. So if remote work is something that also attracts you, then this industry is also very good for that.
So big four, you just named it. Are these the four companies which a software engineer would always target for career growth and for career are these the end of the world, or this is one of the company you can enjoy working in any of the companies?
Yeah, again, it depends on your aspirations. I mean, Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, they obviously pay very handsomely, and there is a lot of experience that you gain because it's the cutting edge software. But also, as with a big company, there will be a lot of work to do there. So generally, it really depends on your own values. Like, where do you want to draw the line between the work-life balance? For somebody like me, for example, I would actually prefer a work-life balance over, let's say, a huge paycheck, hypothetically. So, I might prefer maybe a small company or a mid-sized company. And that's the good thing, that there's enough positions that you can actually choose the industry. You can even join a startup. And if you're passionate about a software, join a startup. You can become part of the, get equity and compensation, become part of the ownership, and then really feel for the product, right? So it's a field where you've got big companies, developed companies, but also booming companies. So the possibilities are endless.
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry.
Go ahead, Osman.
So just I'm gonna go back slightly to when we were talking about for kids. So do you think it's important that kids take some background coding classes or some base level software courses in high school, for example? Like I know there's a CSS class or like a club or something in high schools that they can do over there. So do you think if someone is wanting to pursue software engineering or even comp sci, do you think they should do that in high school, or should they wait till university to start taking directly university level classes?
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's mandatory, but I would definitely say it would help a lot, because then you're obviously at an advantage going into the degree, and you have an idea. Because initially, the first time, like for me, the first time I coded was the first time I took Eng 233 Osman first year. So that was the first.
Yeah.
Fun times, fun times.
Fun times.
But it was very like, it was difficult because I'd never coded before, and I struggled quite a bit. But obviously, alhamdulillah, with time it got better. But I feel like if I had that background, it would have been a lot easier.
Okay.
Sounds
So sorry to interrupt you guys, but in the chat you can write in your questions and we can ask Abdullah. I have a question, Abdullah, that as you mentioned, the first year in engineering, that's the same for all the engineering students. So before entering into engineering, you have to choose that either you'll take mechanical, electrical, software, or after the first year results, you will be making the choices.
So this would be after the first year results. And I think, Usman, you'd have a better idea of the GPA situation right now.
I don't have an exact GPA because obviously they change every year, but so I'll answer both the questions completely. So you go into first year, it's a common year, like Abdullah mentioned. It's you take every course, every engineer takes the same course in first year. Second semester start is when they start releasing, they open up the applications for choosing a major. So I think around February is when they open up, and then their deadline is, I think, within a month or month and a half. So you have to order your choices from 1 to 7. So one being the top choice and 7 being the last choice. And then based on your GPA, basically they will put you into your respective choices, and they'll announce around in June and July. Now for the second question, sorry, what was the second question again, Tata?
The priority, like what's do you need really nice grades to get into software engineering?
Right.
Or?
Right. So generally speaking, I don't know the exact, they change every year, exact GPAs, I'm not sure, but generally speaking, a 3.5 and above pretty much guarantees that you'll go into your first choice. However, in previous years, there have been situations where some majors were 2.8, 2.9. I'm not advocating for that. I would want everyone who's going into engineering to get as high grade as possible. And 3.5 and above, I personally think that you will get into your chosen major.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you, Usman, for answering. So now we move over to a few questions which people are asking. The first among it is, what universities in Canada offer bachelor degree in software?
I would pretty much say anywhere there's an engineering program in Canada. So I don't remember off the top of my head, but obviously, the big ones, UFC, UFA, University of Alberta, UBC in Vancouver, University of Toronto, McGill, Concordia, Carleton,
Waterloo.
Anywhere. Yeah, Waterloo. Waterloo is actually the best program.
Yeah.
I think arguably in the world, pretty much, for software engineering.
Oh, really? That's good to know. One of the Canadian universities best in software engineering.
Yeah, it's very good. Cutting edge research and obviously employability as well. But pretty much anywhere I think that there's an engineering program, I would say there's a software engineering program.
Sounds good. The second question is, my kid is in grade 7. I want him to explore coding and software world. What option I have?
No, that's a good question. So again, it depends on the level that you want to get into. YouTube is despite the fact that YouTube gets a lot of slack, it also has a lot of benefit. So there's a lot of, if you go to, coding 101 or coding for teenagers or coding for young adults, there's tutorials on YouTube on how kids can get into. I
Mhm.
would suggest that if a kid is young, like grade 6, 7, start with HTML and CSS. They're very fun languages to learn, very intuitive. And you can learn them on YouTube. You can learn them on Code Academy, udemy.com. There's also, like you said, the Calgary Library has courses on it. You can find free courses on just Google. If you even just Google HTML free courses, you'll find courses on that. So if somebody's very young, like 10, 12 years of age, 13 years of age, I would say if they can get into HTML and CSS, because it's basically just writing sentences, and it's very intuitive, but it still enables you to think a certain way. So that's what I would say get into. And then once, if they're older, like if they're like 16, 17, 18, then I would suggest Python, because Python is also a very intuitive language to learn, has a lot of benefit, and there's a lot of free courses online.
Yeah,
Awesome.
so when you mention sentences is he's referring to high level languages. So in the technical term for that is high level. So you don't write A is equals to this or B is equals to this a lot in high level languages, which is why it's easier for kids to learn and to grasp at an early age. Of course, there are low level languages like C for those of you who are maybe in electrical or software. C is a low level language because you go really deep into um, defining certain structures and loops and whatever. So for kids, Python and like you said, CSS are pretty good to start off with.
Good, good. Next question is, can you end up getting a job by taking short courses on edX? Uh, like,
Yeah. I mean, I've heard of people getting it. Uh, the most important thing when you're doing that is that you work on a project and that you have something tangible. So there's a website called github.com. That's where you can actually put your code or your project online. So if anybody's interested in getting a job, but they don't necessarily have a degree, or even if they have a degree and they're interested in getting a job, they should have a GitHub account where they put their projects on. So if you're working on let's say if you're learning on your own, software engineering or coding, you should work on a project maybe for fun, maybe volunteer somewhere, maybe volunteer at, like, for example, at a mosque, for example, ask them to build their website for them, or friends cafe, right? Somebody can volunteer, hey, I'll volunteer to make your website or make your database. And then that can be used to show the employers that, look, I've worked on projects, I know the skills. So I know a lot of people who've achieved employment through that process.
so thank you very much, Abdullah, for volunteering and making although we have a website, Friends Cafe, but you can volunteer and help us elevate. So,
Inshallah.
inshallah. Next question is, at the age of 40, with an engineering degree, can someone steer their career towards software engineering?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I would suggest the same thing. If you can learn on your own, ideally you can do some courses, maybe either at SAIT. SAIT has some development courses. There's a an organization called Lighthouse Labs. Lighthouse Labs, they have a boot camp. So I think it's a 6-month boot camp, and they teach you everything about software, or the applicability of, at least. And then they also have industry connections. So I know people who mid-career, they maybe quit their jobs or they took some hiatus and they did that boot camp. So ideally you do that. If you can't do formal education, then again, I would say learn online and then start working on a project. So start volunteering, working on projects, use LinkedIn to advertise what you worked on, GitHub. Um, and these two ways are actually good for people, because I mean, I don't quote me on this, I could be wrong, but I think companies like Google, for example, I think they took away the requirement that you have to be a software engineer. Like, I think they took away that degree requirement. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I heard. And like, I've heard that a lot of people, my colleagues at my previous companies and even the current, are people who don't have software backgrounds. Some of them are psychology majors, English majors, but they did this transition. So it's definitely not impossible, and it can be achieved.
Oh yeah, that's correct. And I know about an individual who is doing masters in business analytics from UBC, although a bit expensive, but it's a really crash program, like 8 months of education and 4 months mandatory co-op, and boom, you're done with masters. and with the co-op you will be getting a job later. So here you go, Umar Muzaffar bhai. Usman,
Yeah.
do you want to continue the questions?
Yeah. So I think we did the one from Yahya Atik, right?
Mm, the next one is
Yeah.
Wadil.
Takfir Javed. Yeah.
Mhm.
So the question is, I'm practicing Microsoft SQL books at Extreme Labs online and planning to challenge Microsoft certificate exams. What do you say about it? I think this is more for Abdullah.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll be very honest. I don't have too much knowledge about Microsoft certifications outside of Microsoft Azure, but I have asked this question from. I have a mentor at the UC, he's a professor. I actually asked him that how helpful are these certifications, especially in SQL. And I mean, I think it's obviously if you don't have a big background in this field, then obviously a certification would help. But make sure that you're able to like kind of apply that knowledge somewhere. So if you're able to show something tangible, it's the same thing, right? But as to the specifics of Microsoft SQL, that certification, I don't know about that too much. But you know, I can once we're offline, I can actually look into it and I can pass it on to Tahabai and then he can pass it on to you.
Perfect.
And
Next, I can take up the question about database developer. What skill sets are required if you are transitioning, like from another industry?
Yeah. So I mean, if you go to a site like Coursera, Udemy, edX, LinkedIn Learning, they have backend developer courses. So you know, typically the language you'll have to learn PHP. SQL is just a querying website. SQL is just used to query a database. It's not really a coding language. It's more of like a it's somewhat a coding language, but not entirely. But PHP is a language that's typically used by places like Facebook, for example. Facebook uses PHP for its backend. So I would say focus on PHP, focus on SQL, and again, if you're able to take some courses online on this, the way these courses work is that they actually help you build a product, and you learn as you go. So I think that would be really beneficial.
Okay, we have a youngster here, Yahya Atik. I'm in grade 9. What should I do to get admission in software engineering? Study hard.
Mashallah. No, that's good that he's like, mashallah, that you're interested in at a young age. That's good. I think obviously like focus on your school for now. Focus on make sure because engineering is competitive. It's probably one of the most competitive fields to get into without sugarcoating it. So a good grades in high school are very important. And if you're interested in software in particular, when you get your summer vacations or when you get some days off, try to look into the languages that I mentioned, HTML and CSS, and see if you can make a website out of it. Just if you have a soccer team or cricket team, whatever, or if you're part of a club, volunteer to make their site, and you'll enjoy the process and you'll learn a lot, and you'll really kind of increase your passion, I think. So two things again I would summarize would say focus on your grades and also see if you can learn HTML and CSS.
That's great. Osman, go ahead with the last question.
yeah, so this question is, I'm learning C, so the language C, and I've been struggling for a while. Is persistence daily? So daily persistence really the key? And the follow-up was, should I learn Python first since C is my first real language after HTML?
Yeah, I would say I would suggest learning Python. Depends on how deep you're into C. If you've been learning it for the past 6 months, then obviously it might not be a good idea to abandon it. But if you just started, I would personally suggest that Python be a good starting point. It's more intuitive than C for sure. And also C isn't really used in industry a lot these days. So does have some application, but it's pretty, I don't want to use the word outdated, but it's not really very used very much in the industry. So if you can do Python, that'd be good. If you're too deep into C, then you can continue it, but then use that as a base to maybe learn Java or C++. And the second thing is that I think if you're able to dedicate every single day, maybe 30 to 45 minutes every day, working on it, persistence is definitely key. I want to add a quick anecdote. I don't think I'm a good coder personally. I don't think coding doesn't come naturally to me. I have to think very hard. But I learned something early on that in this field, hard work is very, very important. So one of our professors said that anybody can learn how to code, but what we teach is how to write good code. And good code doesn't come easy, and it takes a lot of effort. So even if it's not coming naturally to you, if you keep on pushing hard, it'll come, inshallah.
Work hard until you succeed. That's the preservation. So with one question about this present Alberta market, which we went into a dip of recession. How bad was this software engineering industry got affected?
I don't think it got affected too badly. The ones that were affiliated with oil companies did get affected, but generally, software was thriving and is still thriving, and day by day it's growing. And they're investing. The government is investing in it. The country's investing in software. Companies are coming to Calgary, which is a surprise to me that companies are actually moving to Calgary and setting up shop in Calgary. Amazon was almost came to Calgary. There was a very close bid, but that would have been amazing. But it might happen in the future. You never know. So I don't think that the recession hit software. I think generally it actually sustained itself pretty well.
Okay, so comparing different engineering disciplines, software is one of the self-thriving discipline, and hopefully it won't. So anyone who's looking up to getting a degree in software, this is another positive of selecting software engineering. One more question about like presence. You can say engineering, oil and gas, you can say limited to Alberta. Government jobs head towards Ottawa. How would you say software engineering? Although you told many companies are coming towards Alberta and Calgary in particular, but which place you can say the hub of software engineering in Canada?
In Canada, I would definitely say Toronto. Toronto has a lot of software companies. Vancouver also has a lot of presence, a lot of software companies. And then I would say after Toronto and Vancouver, Calgary is a third. But obviously because they're big cities, Toronto is the biggest city in Canada. It has a lot of industries, and every industry needs software people basically. And generally too, there's also like tech movements happening in Toronto. So if it has the most amount of employment opportunities by far.
So you wouldn't include Montreal in that list?
I don't think Montreal is as much as, well, obviously relatively, right? Because it's a much bigger city. But if I was to speak relatively based on the population, I would say Calgary is almost on the same level as Montreal. And the other thing with Montreal that I find a bit, which is a bit of a hurdle, is that French is for many companies is mandatory. So if you're moving from Alberta, you don't know French, then it's hard to get a job.
Yeah. So there's two more questions here. Scholarships from the university. So I'm assuming that's for the software engineering degree. Specifically, what do you have to say about that?
So it depends on the type of degree you do. If you're doing the masters that we were talking about, the 1 year long master, I don't know if there's a lot of scholarship opportunities there. That's something to be looked into. But if you're doing a course, a thesis-based master's, so then the professor that you're working with, they'll give you funding. And typically that's how it goes. Obviously, of course, you can still apply for loans and grants if you're a citizen or if you have a PR. But for the course-based master's, I don't know if there's a lot of scholarships personally.
And what about undergrad?
Undergrad, it really depends. So for engineering, Usman, I think you can talk about this too. The Schulich Scholarship, I think they give that to a few students every year.
Yeah.
When I was applying, because I'd done A-levels, I was able to drop 3 or 4 courses in my first year, and they gave me a little amount of scholarship. So that the total amount that I was able to save was about $5,000 in my first year. And then obviously after that, based on your GPA, you get some scholarships. But I don't think, honestly, that there's a lot of scholarships, except for this Schulich Scholarship.
Yeah. So so my question was more, there's no specific scholarship for a software engineering undergrad degree.
Not to my knowledge, no.
Not to your knowledge,
yeah.
So just to answer your question, there's an admissions scholarship based on your high school average. If you're coming from A-level, they convert it, and then they make a percentage out of that, and then they basically award you based on that. For those who are doing high school over here, I know there's a James Rutherford Scholarship, and there's, I think, a couple more. But since I didn't do my high school here, I'm not 100% on what the scholarships are, but told they will be told to you in your high school. So I'm pretty sure, I think around grade 11 or maybe 12 is when they would tell you what the scholarships are. As far as software specific is concerned, I don't think there's a software specific scholarship for that. The other thing you can look into is the grants that the government gives you if you apply for a student loan. So it's an interesting hack, and I don't want to take too much time, but it's an interesting hack. So um, if you apply for a student loan, um, basically the government gives you a grant based on your income. It's an income-based grant. So that way you can save a lot of money for your tuition. I mean, governments basically, and the grant, you don't have to return it. It's not the loan. So that's something you can look into. But yeah.
And I want to add in it that earlier this year there was a program in collaboration of French Cafe and Young Muslims. And I know Basil, he's one of a very good resource in Calgary. He did shared with me that there are many scholarships or grants which high school students or the parents are not aware of. So I would say get aligned with Basil, and he can also share few resources where to get scholarship from.
Yeah, absolutely. So next question, I'm interested in robotics. Should I slowly work towards it by becoming a web or software developer?
For robotics is a different ballgame. You might need a different degree for that. There are some software companies where software engineers within those companies work in robotics. Like I think one company is Adabotics. It's in Calgary. Off the top of my head, that's the one company that comes to my mind for robotics in Calgary. But generally, again, for these companies to get into a field like robotics or machine learning or AI, they might require additional education. So they might require maybe a degree, a master's degree in robotics or embedded system software.
Personally speaking, I would say if you're interested in robotics, probably go towards either mechanical or electrical, because then
Yeah.
you learn the dynamics part and the circuitry part of robotics. And in electrical, you do some coding classes as well, which like you do practical software projects as well. So maybe look into those as well, see if they pique your interest. But of course, if you want to go into software development, then and then into robotics, then that's another choice you can look into.
I'm not aware if UFC offers, but there's a field of mechatronics, which is a blend of mechanical engineering and electronics, which is more inclined towards robotics.
Yeah.
That can be also
So
where you can get.
Yeah, UFC basically does mechatronics as a minor. So if you choose mechanical as a major, you have a mechatronics minor option. I don't know if electrical has that, but I know mechanical definitely has a minor option in mechatronics. So you take 10 extra courses in your entire degree, and then you get the minor designation on your mechatronics minor designation on your degree.
We'll take the last question because we're almost towards the end. What skill set are required to get QA job in software development?
Very good question. For QA, what they're looking for most is somebody who has attention to detail, and somebody who's able to find gaps in the software. So if you get a QA interview, they're going to present maybe two types of quizzes to you or tests to you. One would be more technical about, maybe software languages or about coding or about algorithms. The other would be more analytical. So they might say, like, for example, for my interview at one of my companies, what they did was they put up a website on the screen and they said, okay, try to find the bugs in this website. You have 5 minutes. And that was it. And then they just left the room. So then I had to identify the bugs in that website. I had to so you need to have that mentality. Also, if you have, you have to be organized for QA, because QAs do a lot of documentation. They do a lot of training. They do a lot of, it's basically a lot of grunt work. And for that, you need to be detail oriented, organized, and you have to pay attention to detail and analytical. So these 4 skills, which are skills you can work on if you kind of spend some time. Yeah.
With this, we have hit the clock. Thank you very much, Abdullah, for the talk. It was really informative. Also, although I don't have any software background, but I've learned a lot today, and
Okay.
hopefully everyone did enjoyed it. Thank you very much, Usman, for co-hosting, Sevbai for the support,
Not a
and
problem.
all the audience. Although we because of the scarcity of time, we took limited questions, but if you have any questions, you can get in touch with any of the FC task force, and directly with Abdullah as well. He's there to support. Thank you very much, Abdullah, for taking our time and sharing the information. Inshallah, Allah will bless you.
Inshallah.
And this particular like recording will be up on the YouTube channel of FC. Everyone is welcome to share it with others, and just for the purpose of promoting Friends Cafe Club of Canada, you can hit like and press the bell icon, and you know everything. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Yeah.
guys.
Thank you,
It was
everyone.
a pleasure.
Thank you,
Jazakallah.
Abdullah.
Thank you. Thank you.